Everybody. It's so good to be with you tonight on this chilly, chilly night. I thought that sweets would be a good topic as we are so close to Valentine's Day, of course. So perhaps after the program, you'll be inspired to consider getting something sweet to celebrate the day. If not for a loved one, at least for yourself. And I hope you have some hot chocolate you can have next to you so you can enjoy the program with nice sweet chocolate. Well, the purpose of the program, my research, was to find sweets that were manufactured in Elgin, not chocolates and sweets that were just sold, but actually made or manufactured in Elgin. And what inspired me was our collection. My husband, Jeff, and I are avid Elgin collectors, and we have a lot of candy boxes and other items related to candy. And I thought, I wonder when those were produced, the candy, and where, and that's what got me going on this particular research. I used newspaper articles as a source, also, of course, Mike Alf's research, his books, and I used the city directories a lot for this program, just to get an idea of the dates of some of these factories, candy factories. I also used the internet for some information and talked to some friends of mine from Elgin who remember some of these places. And I'm assuming that some of you will too. And I'm hoping at the end of the program that if you have something to share, a memory or two about one of these spots, places where you enjoyed some sweets in Elgin, that you can share that with us. I'm using the term sweets a little loosely tonight. I'm including chewing gum and ice cream, caramel, chocolate, popcorn, and potato chips. Now, candy is defined as a confection that features sugar as its main ingredient. And it's been used, that term, since the late 13th century. It comes from the Arabic quandi, and I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but which means made of sugar. Sweets have been around for quite a while. The Bible mentions honey. Around 2000 BC, Egyptians and Arabs and Chinese ate candied fruits and nuts. That was their sweets. And 17th century, English and Americans enjoyed rock candy. I like the name of the candy, but I don't particularly care for it. I don't know if you've ever had it. It's boiled sugar candy on a stick. So today, people enjoy or spend more than $7 billion a year on chocolate, and Americans eat nearly half of the world's supply. No wonder we have a weight issue, huh? You know when the highest candy sales are? Which holiday? You probably can guess. Halloween, and then Christmas, then Easter, and then Valentine's Day. About $2 billion is spent on candy each year. I'm going to go chronologically, and I'm going to start with chewing gum. Get the Joseph Bowler Company, and I need to get my next slide going here. And it seems to be frozen here. I'm going to talk about the Joseph Bowler and Company. It's a chewing gum company, and give you a little history about chewing gum. I wonder if, Liz, if you could come and help me with this. It seems to be frozen, the screen. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about the chewing gum, a little history about gum. In 1871, Thomas Adams from Staten Island bought 1 ton of chicle. Chicle is resin from the there it is. Thank you. The sapodilla tree, which is in southern Mexico and Central America. Now, the plan was that Mr. Adams had was to produce carriage and bicycle tires with the chicle, rain boots, toys, and masks. However, all of those attempts failed. So then he got the idea to make chewing gum. Now, I'm a little, I just kind of wonder how he got from tires to chewing gum, but somehow he made that transition and he created the Black Jack gum. I'm sure you've heard of that. That was the first flavored gum that was sold in the US, and it was the first gum sold in sticks, and that was in 1888. Well, if you look here, Joseph Bolar from Elgin he opened his factory in 1875 at 69 Douglas, which was Douglas and Dexter Street. Then he moved to Channing and Laurel Street, and finally moved in 1887 to the old shoe factory on Slade Avenue. Now, this was a factory east of Prospect Street. This is not the factory the shoe factory lost. This was a different building that it was raised in 1929. Now, he moved to this larger space because he purchased a gum factory in Chicago, and he consolidated that factory with the Elgin Gum Factory in 1887. Production of gum in that first year was 50,000 boxes, which is 11 million chews. Don't you love that? That's how gum people count their sales. 11 million chews. By the close of the factory in 1890, 30 million chews were produced. And you can see on the screen here some of the flavors: banana, mint julep, wintergreen. Actually, spruce was the most popular flavor. These are actual gum wrappers that have survived time, which is amazing, isn't it? They're just paper wrappers. Most of the employees in the gum factory, there were 10 to 20, 25 employees were girls, because they were, of course, for cheap labor. So use the roller. Here, now you see here the advertisement on the left side of the screen here. It says that they were the originators of and leaders in pictorial gum. Tobacco cards, you may know, had cards with tobacco came with cards, and they were included kind of as a protection for the tobacco. And then, of course, bubble gum later in the 50s, especially bubble gum with baseball cards were sold. Well, Volar started with small little cards, and you can see them on the right side. I don't know that they were so much protecting the gum, but they were an incentive to purchase the gum. They also had little, very colorful bird die cuts. And that was all just to be used as a way to make sales. Unfortunately, however, the investment in the cards and the pictures that were included with the gum was a contributor to the downfall of the company. It was very costly to print, and you had to maintain a large inventory of these cards because you had to turn over, you had to have a variety. So that caused them to go into bankruptcy in 1890. August Sheely. Now, this was not gum. Now we're into chocolates here. August Sheely Company was a grocery store and a baking establishment for many years. And in the city directories, they indicated that they were around from the 1890s through the 1940s. When I looked in the 1951 directory, they weren't around anymore. In the 1890-91 directory, it mentions Sheely and Shosh at 12 Chicago Street as a confectioner. So the Sheely Company did make their own chocolates. at some point in the history of the company. Later, they were located at 100-106 Douglas, which was where the Civic Center parking lot is, across from the library. That's where they were. I'm not entirely sure if the chocolates at this point in time were made on the premises, although they have an advertisement in 1921 advertising homemade and bakery made baked goods. So it could be that they all were still making their chocolates in the 1920s, but they definitely sold them specifically for the Shealy Company because of the box. Oh, by the way, I wanted to tell you before we go any farther, I have some of the items behind me, and I know they're a little hard to see, but this is where my inspiration for tonight came from these candy boxes and candy items. Okay, we'll go to the next, the Schram's Ice Cream Parlor and Confectionary. Now, this was John and George Schram, brothers, who opened their parlor in 1886 at 18 Douglas Street. Now, that particular building was razed and replaced by a brick building. Then they moved in 1892 to 15 Douglas, and that's this picture. You see, this is an older picture because you can see Magdalena there and the Bangkok House on the first level, but that's where the Shrams moved their ice cream parlor. They also had a fruit store and a confectionery. It seemed that fruit often was sold with confectionery. This particular company was notable because it was the first company in the United States to use a half horsepower motor for freezing ice cream. They did manufacture their own candy also. And the brothers sold this business to Louis Bloom in 1896. You probably know that name, Bloom, and we'll get to them in just a little bit. The Elgin Caramel Company. Now, this was located near where the center is now, the empty lot near the center. It was operated in the town from 1894 to 1900 and then moved to the city of Chicago. The whole company moved. There were 40 grades of caramel that were made. They sold at 5 to 10 cents a pound. Now, the company was successful. They employed over 200 employees in 1894. They had to move to Chicago because they couldn't get enough help in Elgin. They also, they hired girls of 15 years or older, and they had trouble finding girls to work for them because the girls were looking for or got work at, you probably can guess, at the watch factory, which no doubt was better paid. Now, if you look at this, this is from our collection, and it's framed, but each one of these cards is an individual card. You bought 2 caramels and 1 small picture for 1 cent. And they had 6 different sets of pictures, 20 different stories told. So we've got Robinson Crusoe here. And again, a good marketing ploy because you keep buying the caramels because you want to get all of a variety of picture cards here. This one, Robinson Crusoe. Yeah, these are very rare, my husband tells me, to find. You just don't see these. So you've seen it here tonight. And we have, you probably will recognize this place, Lakeview Place, 697 Forest Avenue. This was Mr. Wilford Tubbs was the owner of this store. It says Max Grocery on this one, but Mr. Tubbs owned it in 1896. He opened the store and operated it until his death in 1944. It's located, and the building is still there on the corner by Lord's Park. Do you recognize it? It doesn't have the shingles anymore, but that building is still there. The second floor was added in 1921 so that Wilford and his mother could live above the store. Wilfred made his own ice cream and he baked his own sugar cones. And they were pancake like batter that were flavored with nutmeg. That was the cone. He also sold soft drinks, sodas, malts, sundaes, roasted peanuts, and of course, what goes with all these sweets? Cigars. This was a great location because you could get your ice cream on your way to Lord's Park or a walk in the park. And now we come to Bloom's. Bloom's was in operation from 1896 to 1964, a very popular hangout, of course. Louis Bloom came from Germany in 1888 at the age of 17. He worked for the Schram brothers at 15 Douglas, as I told you earlier, and purchased the business from the brothers in 1896. He manufactured ice cream and candy on the site of the parlor. The candy kitchen was over the parlor, and he made over 100 varieties of candy. In 1921, the newspaper noted that there was an ice cream plant that was at the rear of the building. So all the ice cream and candy was made on site. At first, Mr. Bloom sold only vanilla ice cream. That was in 1896, but 30 years later, he was producing 12 different flavors. In 1926, 600 gallons a day of ice cream was made. It must have been delicious, huh? And I want to show you now my hat. I don't know if you can see my Bloom's hat. This would have been from the 50s, certainly not from 1896. I have a menu from Bloom's. This is probably a post-1934 menu because it does say at the bottom to see the other side for a regular menu. They were known especially for their ice cream molds, and special orders would be taken for ice cream for special events. Look at some of those flavors: amber pudding, pistachio, caramel, pecan, making me hungry. The glass was a candy fruit, so peach glass, special ice cream, looks delicious. The museum has a collection of some of Mr. Bloom's molds, which were fun to look at. And look at on the other side of the menu, the cold drinks. They served drinks, and of all things, egg drinks. An egg lemonade. I'm not so sure that would be something that I would try, but somebody must have liked it. Here's a picture of the inside, the front section of Bloom's at the turn of the century, just by looking at the clothing that these people are wearing. It did start out as an ice cream parlor, which I said, and then expanded into a restaurant in 1934. You see on the left there, the ice cream parlor, and then, the counter, and then on the right side is the candy, all the different flavors of candy. And the building goes way back. I don't know if you remember, but in the back section, that's where the parlor is, where you could be served ice cream. Museum also has the Bloom cash register on display, which is really a beautiful piece of work and quite heavy. Here's the same building, the back section, a little later photo. Notice the booths now and not the tables. And this was a very popular hangout, I've been told, in the 50s and the 60s. When Louis died in 1941, his son Eddie ran the business until it closed in 1964. I know many Elginites remember Bloom's and no doubt have quite a few stories of maybe dates there or romances that started at Bloom's. The Elgin Fruit and Candy Company. It was in operation from 1905 to 1948 at 12 South Grove. All that information right on the candy box there. It was a small store next to Kimball Furniture Company downtown. About 1948 to about 1957, it was in operation at 70 South Grove. I have, oops, have a menu. Good, yeah. I'll just keep the menu from the Elgin Fruit and Candy Company. They serve sundaes, and I just wanted to mention some of the sundaes, some of the flavors, which sounded very delightful for Valentine's Day. Merry Widow, the Honeymoon, Lover's Delight, Get the Cupid. Those were some of the names of their sundaes. They also had a Merry Widow parfait. What is a Merry Widow? A Merry Widow, I wonder. They also sold not only fruit and candy and ice cream, but they had cigars and tobacco available. One of the disclaimers they had on their menu was not responsible for loss or exchange of personal property. I'm just kind of wonder what kind of property you would exchange at the Elgin Fruit and Candy Company. Here's Mr. Peace, the candy man, Martin A. Peace, I should say. He is listed in the directory in 1911 at 18 North Spring Street, which is at the southwest corner of Spring and Chicago. It's only listed 1 year in the directories at that address. So he must have sold candy there because I have been by his home, which was a different address. At the bottom, it says he's the originator of teaching home candy making in this manner. Now he moved from making candy to making books on how to make candy. This is from 1913. The picture and this are from one of his candy books that we have. It says it contains practical recipes by a professional candy maker. So obviously he did make and sell candy. It's explained so clearly. He said that anyone can make them. The price though seems a little high to me, $1 for the candy for the book. But he must have been successful because he published at least 2 other candy books. We have Ohlhaber's Candy and Ice Cream. Now this was located where now we have the Martini Room right next to the Martini Room. That's where this candy and ice cream was located, 157 Chicago Street. Around 1909 to the 1930s, it was around town. It was also called the Sweet Spot, which is where they had retail. But they also made their own candy and ice cream on site. The company must have been successful because then they built an ice cream plant in 1921 at River and Dexter. That's where the city ice rink used to be. And it was a 2-story brick factory, very substantial. So they must have been quite successful. Now this is a Van Horn Gilmore Company. It was located on Route 3 in unincorporated Elgin. It's listed in city directories from 1921 through 1936, but it's never listed as a confectioner. He was never listed as a confectioner. In 1921, he's a canned fruit processor, and in 1929, he's in farming, and then 1933 to 36, canning. So he must have, whatever a humdinger was, it must have been made from fruit or maybe some covered fruit. Notice the spelling there, popcorn. It has popcorn too, though. It is popcorn, but popcorn can Confection. The candy probably was not the main source of the company's income since it was never listed in the directory. And we have the Butler candies. Butler candies were listed in the directories again just one year in 1913 at 288 Grove. The company started in Clarence Butler's home, which is somewhat unusual because in the late 19th and early 20th century, homemade candy, that is candy that was made for sale in the home, was really considered a female task and usually done seasonally or for some extra income. So this is a little unusual that a man would be making candy in the home. The industrial candy production was the masculine, typically the masculine candy business. Don't you love that can? Isn't it beautiful? It has a deco look to it. Baking and Ice Cream Company, the D&W, it was known as from 1922 to 1931. John Delancey and Fred Witherall, D&W firm, were producers of ice cream. They consolidated the D&W Ice Cream Company with the W. Kind Baking Company in 1922. And that's why you can see on this postcard in the picture, it's called the H. Kind Baking Company. But D&W is located right next to it at 414, 420 McBride. Now that was on the river. Now it's an empty lot just north of the library. D&W business prospered. In 1928, they opened a branch in Oregon, Illinois. And in 1930, ice cream manufacturing opened in Rockford. So they had a good business. In 1931, the business separated again, remaining at the same address, but separating the ice cream into City's Ice Cream Company and baking into Witherall Baking Company. So they separated the two. Here's one of the cartons from D&W Ice Cream, and we know it's pre-1931 because of the name. After 1931, it was called City's Ice Cream. Elgin Chocolate Products, 69 North Street. Now they were producer, it says, of Elgin Cutto Nuts, which was an entirely new item at the time. It was a candy bar. The location was where the center parking lot around Hemmons. That's where this factory was. And around 1923, 24, they made chocolates, sugar-coated nuts, chocolate-covered fruits, and sold their products to candy shops. I added this one to the program because of its success and its expansion. In 1926, the products were sold in Chicago and Elgin, and their monthly average was 100,000 pounds of nuts and sweets produced. That's 50 tons of nuts and sweets. That's a lot. They then began expansion because they were doing so well into the Midwest. Now we get to some of the homemade candies. They're some of my favorite boxes anyway. This is Mrs. Barrow's Open Kettle, and you can see, and you probably can't see the address, but it's listed at 871 Washburn Street. It's right on the side of the box there. This would have been candies made in the 1950s. Good example of home candy production, mid-century candy. It's a house, and I did go by it. It's on the corner of Washburn and Commonwealth. It was listed 1951 and earlier as being 359 South Commonwealth, and then changed the address to the side street. 1958, it was listed as a Washburn address. So this box has to be later than 1958. I did see the house. It's a brick home, but I didn't see the kettle. I don't know where that is. And the Cornish sisters candy. Their picture of their home is at the top there. 774 Bluff City Boulevard. They operated and made candy out of their home from 1925 to 1964, somewhere in 1964. That was the last directory listing anyway. In 1933, the directory lists the sisters Mildred and May. Now, I've heard stories of people going to their house, especially at holiday times, to buy chocolate for Easter or Christmas, and I've told it was very delicious. If you look, you didn't enter through the house, you went to the back of the house, and there was a stairs there to go down into the basement, and you entered through the basement, and that's where the candy was sold. And then we have some popcorn. Jen's Potato Chip Company. They made popcorn, but they also made candy-coated corn, chocolate peanut clusters, and crispettes. Now, there are 3 phases of this company. It had quite a history. It started out as the Potato Chip Company and was operated by Otto Jens until his death in 1950. There were several manufacturing locations in town. Some were on the west side. A couple of the locations, it moved a bit, were in homes. They did at first just made potato chips, and they made chocolate peanut clusters and crispettes. And a crispette was a popcorn coated with sugar or molasses and had cinnamon and nutmeg flavor to it. It was very similar, I think, to a rice cake. That was the first phase of the company, and that was until 1950. And then over 20 years later, in 1973, the son Albert Jens, started the company up again. He called it Jens Popcorn Company, and they sold popcorn, Jensettes, which was a special type of crispette, and corn nuggets, which were flavored corn cakes. The third phase of the company then was when Albert died, his widow, Annetta, continued the business with help from her daughter and her son-in-law, and they operated the business out of the coach house on the grounds of their home. And my husband and I have packages of, now this was, they sold unpopped popcorn, and they purchased, I believe it was from Indiana, they purchased the popcorn, but then they packaged it under the Jens name. We have some from Gromer's that were sold. I don't know if you remember Gromer's on the west side of town. Wonderful grocery store. Some more popcorn, but it's a caramel corn shop, so there's the sweet part. This was at 75 South Grove. It was in the 1950s. It was near the Crocker Theater. Now, the shop was vented outside to the sidewalk. So you could smell, as you walked by, you could smell that wonderful smell of caramel and popcorn. Very clever to marketing, don't you think? These are my favorite, some of my favorite. I wish I had met them. This is Ernest Buster Brown and his brother, their popcorn stand in Fountain Square. The popcorn stand was in operation from 1910 to 1958. Buster took over the stand in partnership with Carl Blumke in 1910, and then his brother Willis joined him. It was located on South Grove against the wall of the Elk drugstore, right next to the Rialto Theater. It's a parking lot now from the southwest corner of Chicago and Grove. Here's a little later, the 1950s shot of some girls. It was open 7 days a week from 8 in the morning until 10 at night. Buster retired in 1958, and that was the end of the popcorn stand. Just think about though, 48 years, think of the length of the business. 48 years operating that popcorn stand, 14-hour days. I do have friends who remember the stand too, and maybe you bought some popcorn from Buster. Now we have have to include this candy man. This is an article from the Courier News in 1993. This is Ed Schneider. And at that time, he was 81 years old. He owned Schneider's excavating company. And after he retired, he started making homemade candy in the basement of his West Side home. He made 500 to 600 one-pound boxes a year. He made chocolate, it's all candy, chocolate marshmallows, vanilla creams, chocolate almond bars, just to name a few of them. But he never sold any of it. He traded the candy, he said, for smiles. He would give candy to friends, to family, to employees of his company, and he would give candy to local churches so they could sell it as fundraiser. Now, Ed learned how to make candy by taking night classes at Chicago Candy School. And then later, he actually ended up teaching classes at U46, at local churches, and at the U of I had some courses in candy making. So he's a true candy man. There are other sweet places. Looking in the directories, you can kind of give us an idea of how popular certain kinds of sweets were. Of course, bakeries, and I didn't include really bakeries in the program tonight, but in 1900, there were 8 bakeries, and in 1951, there were 13 bakeries. Today, we have what, 2, 3 maybe? Drugstores, of course, had soda fountains, but they didn't make their own ice cream. Fruit and confectionaries. In 1870, Elgin had 3. In 1933-34, there were 27 confectioners listed. 1951, 14 listed. So Elgin really did have a sweet tooth, I think. Department stores also sold chocolates. They didn't necessarily make their own. We have a box at home of Spee's candy, but I'm assuming they did not make that, but they did package it with their name on it, like Marshall Fields would do. Hamburger and malt shops, of course, had sweets, the sweet malts. And then church fundraisers also produced sweets. That churches would make candy or fudge, other sweet things that they would make either in the church basement or make at home. The women would make, and they would sell it then for special projects. Well, I haven't included all the places of Elgin candy production, but this does give us an idea of the popularity of candy in Elgin's culture. Now, I thought it might be fun to expand our knowledge of candy beyond Elgin sweets and have a candy quiz. This includes candy that we're all familiar with, so you'll probably do very well. You keep your own score, and I'll give you your answers as we go, so you get immediate feedback. I hope you're ready. All right, here we go. Number 1, what chocolate candy did the first space shuttle crew insist on taking into space with them in 1982? Was it Twix, Kit Kat bars, or M&Ms? It was C, M&Ms. Of course, they didn't melt in their gloves. Maybe that's why they took them. Actually, M&Ms was named after creators of the candy, Forrest Mars Sr. and William Murray's. It was introduced in 1941 as a snack for GIs in World War II, which makes sense also. Very easy to hold and very easy to transport. Number 2, which of these treats, based on those featured in the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, is not a real treat you can buy? Everlasting Gobstoppers, fizzy lifting drinks, or scrumdiddlyumptious chocolate? The answer is B. You can buy Gobstoppers and you can buy scrumdiddlyumptious chocolate from the Willy Wonka Candy Company, which is in operation. I've also seen golden ticket bars too, I think, for sale. The fizzy lifting drinks were in the movie. That's what made Charlie and Grandpa lift off the ground, but you can't buy it, unfortunately. We can't get lifted. All right, number 3. Which treat did former President Millard Fillmore stash in the Oval Office? Was it licorice whips, chocolate bars, or cotton candy? It was A, licorice whips. This third president, President Fillmore, loved licorice, and he kept a stash of them and a secret supply in his Oval Office. Number 4, in the United Kingdom, Snicker bars were once known by a different name. What were they called? This one is a little harder, I think, unless you lived in the UK. And actually, I did this program one place, and there was a woman who lived in the UK. She was the only one that had this answer. A, Monarch bars, B, Marathon bars, or C, Big Ben bars? The answer, B, Marathon bars. The name was changed in 1990 by the Mars company just to match the name to the rest of the world. I'm not sure why they had their own name. Snickers were introduced in 1930 and were named after the Mars family pet horse. Snickers. How you doing? Are these easy or hard? Number 5, for whom were Baby Ruth bars named? Were they named A, for baseball player Babe Ruth, for B, President Grover Cleveland's daughter Ruth, or for C, a favorite child actress named Baby Ruth? The answer is B. The bars were introduced in 1920s. Baby Ruth was the nickname of President Cleveland's daughter, Baby Ruth. Okay, number 6, which candy, E.T.'s favorite, shot up in sales after the movie came out? Was it Reese's Pieces, M&M's, or candy corn? The answer is A, Reese's Pieces. The movie was introduced in 1982, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and the sales of the candy Reese's Pieces increased by 65% after the release of the movie. So it was good advertising for them. Number 7, which character graced the best-selling Pez dispensers of all times? Bugs Bunny, Peppermint Patty, or Santa Claus? The answer is C, Santa Claus. Must have been a good stocking stuffer Christmas time. Number 8, which former president's portrait was done entirely in jelly beans? Was it Bill Clinton, Richard Nixon, or Ronald Reagan? It was C, Ronald Reagan. The portrait was made of 10,000 jelly beans. It hangs in the Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California, so it's still around. I remember that Reagan did love jelly beans, and he had blueberry flavored ones especially made for his 1981 inauguration. Jelly beans actually were promoted as a treat to be sent along with Union soldiers during the Civil War. That's how old they are. Popularity remained after the war, and billions of jelly beans are sold even today. Another good candy, easily transported and held in your hand. Number 9, about how many pounds of candy corn are produced annually? A, more than 35 million pounds, B, 15 million pounds, or C, 5 million pounds? Actually, it's A, more than 35 million pounds, which equals approximately 9 billion individual pieces. It's a lot of candy. Number 10, which character uttered the famous Butterfinger slogan, "Nobody better lay a finger on my Butterfinger," in commercials for the candy? Was it Elmo, Dora the Explorer, or Bart Simpson? It was Bart Simpson, C. He and the other Simpsons starred in a series of commercials from 1990 to 2001. Now, the name Butterfinger came from a contest. And it was suggested by a man who tended to drop things, and he earned that name as a nickname. Not sure how dropping things makes it a good name for a candy bar, but the idea of a butter finger, I guess it does. Right, number 11, which of these gave lollipops its name? A song, famous sportscaster, or a racehorse? And it was C, racehorse. In the book Food for Thought by Ed Pierce, he states that the inventor of lollipops in 1908 had named them after a racehorse, Lollipop. The first lollipop making machine could produce 40 lollipops a minute, but today the lollipops are produced at 5,900 a minute. How are you doing? Just a few more left. I hope you're keeping score. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Is it 600, 2,000, or no one knows? You probably guessed this one. C, no one knows. According to Tootsie Roll Industries, you can't tell. It depends on two factors: the size of your mouth and the amount of saliva you have. Very scientific. Number 13, when was the first chocolate factory built in the US? Was it 1765, 1803, or 1911? It was actually A, 1765, according to the National Confectioners Association, and they should know. Number 14, when lifesavers were created, they came in only one flavor. What was that flavor? Was it cherry, lemon, or peppermint? It was C, peppermint. They debuted in 1912 as Pep-O-Mint. The 5-flavor package came out later in 1935. And our last question, which is the easiest question, although maybe the licks was an easy also, but Hershey's Kisses are known for their distinctive wrapper. And what is that wrapper? Is it gold paper, silver foil, or transparent plastic wrap? Easy peasy, huh? All, of course, B, silver foil. They always use silver except for the holidays when they're covered in colored foils to mark the occasion. Now, the Hershey's Kisses were introduced in 1907, and that's when they were hand wrapped until the paper ribbon was added to the foil in 1924. Well, how did you do? Was your score worthy of a prize? I'm sure it was. So treat yourself to something sweet. Now, as I conclude, I want to thank you for your attention, and I want to extend a friendly COVID kiss to you. If you can see it. Hugs and kisses, and have a good Valentine's Day. And thank you. If you have any comments or questions.